Okay, so deep beneath the cold, dark waters of the North Sea, there's a scar on the face of the planet. It's so huge, it tells a story of almost unimaginable power. And for decades, we thought we knew that story. But as we're about to find out, the seafloor was hiding a pretty big secret, one that completely rewrites the history of our planet's hidden fury. So let's dive in and uncover the truth that's been buried beneath the waves.
So let's talk about the legend. This is the Storegga Slide. Now, for geologists, this isn't just any old landslide. Oh no, this is the benchmark, the heavyweight champion. It's the biggest one we know of, an event that happened off the coast of Norway, and it's been studied for years as the ultimate example of what can happen on the seafloor.
And the scale, I mean, just look at this number, 3,200 cubic kilometers. It's kind of hard to even wrap your head around a number that big, right? So to put in perspective, imagine taking all that rock, mud, and sediment and just dumping it all over the country of Iceland. You'd cover the entire country in a layer of debris nearly 30 meters thick. It's a truly mind-boggling amount of stuff.
And for the longest time, the story we all told was simple and honestly pretty terrifying. The idea was that about 8,150 years ago, this colossal chunk of the seafloor just let go. One single catastrophic failure. This thing was so violent, it unleashed a monster tsunami that absolutely slammed into Scotland, Norway, and even washed up on the shores of Greenland. For decades, this has been the textbook case, the official story.
But you know, science is kind of like a detective story. And sometimes it just takes one little clue, one piece of evidence that doesn't fit, to unravel the entire case. For the scientists studying Storegga, that clue came from deep inside the mud on the seafloor, and it just didn't make any sense at all.
So it led to a pretty massive question. What if this legendary event wasn't what it seemed? What if the story we've been telling ourselves for half a century was missing a huge piece of the puzzle? And that's the question that kicked off this whole new investigation. Okay, so here's where the plot really thickens. According to the old theory, the Storegga event should have acted like a giant bulldozer. It should have just scraped the seafloor completely clean. Anything recent, younger than 30,000 years or so, should have been totally wiped away. But when scientists actually took core samples, what they found was, well, impossible. Right in the middle of the slide's scar, they found these younger sediments, only 10,000 to 18,000 years old, just sitting there, perfectly preserved. This was a huge problem. It was like cracking open a sealed Egyptian tomb and finding a brand new smartphone inside. It just shouldn't be there. This young mud was absolute proof that the area wasn't scraped clean 8,150 years ago. So how in the world did it survive? Well, the only explanation was that the story of a single giant slide had to be wrong. So, to solve this mystery, researchers had to look deeper, not just at the mud, but into the structure of the seafloor itself. They basically needed to get an X-ray of the seabed to see the history that was buried down there. And to do that, they brought in the heavy-duty tech. Using these advanced echo sounders, they sent powerful sound waves deep into the ocean floor. As those waves bounced back off all the different layers of sediment, a computer put it all together into this amazing high-resolution image, kind of like an ultrasound for the planet. And the picture they got back was, whoa, it was pretty shocking. The echoes showed this hidden boundary line deep inside the slide scar. And below it was this massive, jumbled, chaotic layer of debris that clearly came from an older landslide. They weren't just looking at the aftermath of one event anymore, they were looking at the ghost of another. And with that evidence, the impossible mud and the echoes from the deep, all the pieces finally started to click into place. The team had uncovered a ghost from the Ice Age, a completely unknown, massive landslide that happened long before the famous Storegga event. They even gave it a name, the Storegga Slide. And let's be clear, this was not some small tremor before the main show. This was a colossal event all on its own that happened around 20,000 years ago, right at the peak of the last Ice Age, a ghost that had been hiding in plain sight for thousands of years. This discovery created a whole new timeline of catastrophe. So first, about 20,000 years ago, the Storegga Slide carves out this huge initial scar. Then, for almost 12,000 years, sediment slowly drifts down and starts to fill it in. And then, about 8,150 years ago, the Storegga Slide hits the exact same spot, clearing out a bunch of that newer sediment, but, and this is the key, leaving the older clues behind. So this was the story we always knew. Simple, clean, one and done. One giant landslide carves out a massive scar. End of story. But now we know the reality is so much more complex and, frankly, more incredible. The scar was made in two completely different stages. The Storegga Slide did the heavy lifting 20,000 years ago, and then Storegga was like the massive sequel that came thousands of years later.
Now, this discovery isn't just about rewriting a geology textbook. This has really profound and pretty urgent implications for how we understand the risks that are lurking under the waves today. We're talking risks that affect everything from coastal communities to the critical undersea cables and pipelines we all rely on.
This table really breaks it all down. We went from thinking there was just one major slide to knowing there were at least two. That means they happen more often than we thought, not just one per ice age. And while the Storegga Slide itself was smaller, the really big takeaway here is that the tsunami hazard is a more frequent, recurring threat in this part of the world.
So the real takeaway is this. The problem isn't a single once-in-a-blue-moon event. The problem is that this entire section of the seafloor off Norway is just fundamentally unstable. It's a potential failure zone, capable of producing multiple mega landslides over time. And that is a major, major reassessment of the risk.
This chart gives you the new math. That original massive volume of 3,200 is now split. You can see the Storegga Slide accounts for about 900 cubic kilometers of it, and the newer, revised Storegga Slide is around 2,300. Still enormous, for sure, but a very different picture. And here's what might be the most chilling part of this whole discovery. Even though we now know the Storegga Slide was significantly smaller than we thought, at least 30% smaller, it was still powerful enough to create that devastating basin-wide tsunami. It just goes to show you don't need the absolute biggest event on record to cause an utter catastrophe. So, it leaves you with this final, fascinating question. If a monster like the Storegga Slide could hide for so long, right underneath the most studied landslide on Earth, what other secrets does our planet have buried? What other hidden histories are just down there waiting for the right clues to bring them to the surface?